Matt, if you can just tell us a little bit more about yourself personally, how you found your way to this work and why you do what you do in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's so funny because before I got into the dating space, I was in the military, and so a lot of my friends from the military, when they see that I'm like doing dating coaching and working with women and all these things, a lot of them are like, "Dude, what are you doing?" you know, I do have a lot of really supportive friends that from the military that are just like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're doing, but go do it," and really a lot of this is just me following my heart, and following a calling that I feel drawn to. And, I came from a space of, I came from a broken family, like, a lot of people do nowadays. And, both of my parents have been married, more than 3 times. And most of the people in my family have been, just married and divorced a bunch of times. And I didn't really have any role models for how to have a successful and a happy relationship when I was young. And when I was, I actually came into the industry as a client. I fell in love with my high school sweetheart, and I bought her a ring, and I was planning on getting married to her. And she ended up breaking my heart. She cheated on me with a friend of mine. And, I was just really heartbroken for a long time. And when I came back into the dating scene, it was like, I just didn't have any idea what to do. I was that stereotypical nice guy that everybody talks about. I was just like, I used to buy my girlfriend flowers every month and, take her out on dates all the time and just let her walk all over me every chance she got. And it didn't really translate well to creating the love life that I wanted or finding somebody. And originally I didn't want to get into the dating space, but it kind of became a necessity because I felt so hopeless. I felt so like I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I wanted someone to love me and accept me for who I was, but it just didn't seem to be happening. And so I got into the dating space. I became a client, and I learned a whole bunch of things that got me a lot of attention and got me into relationships, but relationships that really just didn't last very long. And it kind of I eventually became a men's dating coach because I got so good at getting into relationships. It's one of the huge problems that we have in the dating industry on both sides is that there's a huge focus on the short-term aspect of things, right? Like, how do I get this person to do this thing and be my boyfriend or girlfriend and commit to me and, and do all these things. And, and those are legitimate concerns, don't get me wrong. It's just that when you come from that space and you use techniques and tactics that are just designed from a short-term perspective like that, it ends up just destroying any long-term potential that you have for a relationship. And it really kind of came to fruition with me back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007. I was dating this girl. We'd been seeing each other for a few months at the time, and it was actually Valentine's Day. And we were supposed to meet at this restaurant, this like bar restaurant place, and then we're going to go to another restaurant for dinner. And so I got to the bar that we're supposed to meet at, and she actually came in, but she came in with another guy. Oh. And yeah, exactly. Oh. And it was, and they walked right past me. I was like one of the only people in the place, and they walked right past me and sat at the bar and just started talking to me, to each other, and ignored me the entire time. And after about 15, 20 minutes of this, my girlfriend at the time got up and walked to the bathroom. And I walked up to the guy who I had actually met before. And I was like, "Hey, man." He's like, "Oh, hey, what's up, dude?" And I'm like, "What are you doing here with my girlfriend?" And he's like, oh my God, I had no idea. Like I don't know what's going on right now, and I was just like, okay. And so I walked out and didn't ever talk to her really again. And, it was one of those times in my life where I remember going home and just sitting there and thinking like, oh man, like I've been working so hard at this and I've learned so many things and, and this wasn't, this was the first time that happened to me, but it was kind of this pattern that I was getting into, these relationships with these people, and these things were happening. We're having bad breakups, and it was really bad. And I was like, man, there's something I'm missing. There's something that I don't get that I need to figure out. To make a long story short, what I ended up finding out was that I was going in the wrong direction. I was using all these techniques, all these manipulation, games, and all these different things that really don't lead to a great relationship. And so I kind of I did a little bit of a spiritual journey and went inward, and eventually started finding a lot of different kind of authentic ways to connect with people and connect with myself and, express who I am and actually connect with people in a way that they get to know who I am instead of just this game or this line or, these things that I'm saying. And which actually led me to, the best relationship that I've ever had in my life. And, and really what I found is that there's just a better way. I believe that there's a better way for men and women to relate to one another. Using games and manipulation, trying to trick people into, wanting you is a spiral down to breakup, to heartache, to pain, to broken relationships. And so, I'm on a mission here, and it's a mission to kind of spread the word of how to connect with someone in an authentic way. When I was a men's dating coach, it was actually a huge problem that we had was just that these guys would go out and they'd meet these women and everything would be going great until they got physically intimate with each other. And a lot of times the guys would lose interest. And so I started looking at like what's going on here. And one of the things that I found was that these relationships that these guys were getting into, they were very sexually attracted to these women, but they weren't getting into they weren't emotionally attracted to them. They weren't connecting with them on a deep emotional level, which is what people need in order to want to stay, especially men. Men need that in order to stay in a relationship. If you want a guy to, want to be with you after you get physically intimate with them, you have to connect with them on an emotional level. And, so that's, I've kind of taken a lot of what I learned from the men's side, and I've been working with women, and honestly, I like working with women better. I think that women are better at kind of setting the frame and the pace for a relationship to actually last than men typically are, mostly because I think a lot of guys just don't care as much, or they just don't work as hard at it, or they're more focused on that initial meet to sex phase than whereas women typically are more focused on the long-term relationship aspect of things.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That was very interesting, and I appreciate you sharing some of your own story. I think a lot of us that feel called to do this work in the world have come into it from some of our own struggles and from our own journey. And I believe, like you said, there's so many of us that didn't necessarily have really good or strong role models in our lives and haven't seen some of these things modeled. And yet, for some reason, sometimes we think we're just supposed to automatically know intuitively how to get into and maintain a great relationship. And obviously, that doesn't work so well for a lot of people. I know it was a long and winding journey for me, as I shared with you. So I want to swing back, though, to something that you said that I think is really important, and just explore this a little bit more, if that's okay, Matt. And that is, you were talking about the physical connection and you were talking about the emotional connection. And of course, it's no secret that the perception for many women is that all men want is sex. And you even said, of course, a lot of men in your experience are focused on that meeting to getting physically intimate phase. And then you also said something which I also strongly believe, which is that in order for a man to stick around, there has to be that emotional connection. So it seems to be a bit of a conundrum in some ways, because women oftentimes have this perception that a man will feel more emotionally connected with him if there is that physical intimacy. And then when it doesn't happen that way, then she can end up feeling used or disappointed or discarded or frustrated or mad and thinking all men are jerks, etc. So I just want to have you tell us a little bit more about what you recommend for women and some of the things that you think are really essential for women to know in order to be able to build that emotional connection so that we don't have this big disconnect, which is a huge, huge problem. I mean, we hear about this all the time, and this frustration between men and women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to address one thing that you just said, and it's that whole thing about, men wanting sex. And there's a lot to that that's true. There's definitely a lot of that that's true. And at the same time, I'd say that probably a good 95+% of the men that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of men about what they really want in a relationship. Even the guys that are players, I know lots of player guys, and most of them, they're like, well, I'll just be talking to them, having guy talk, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm trying to hook up with this girl, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, cool, man. Well, do you think that you'd be interested in having a committed relationship, or like, and like I'll get like, serious on them for a second, and they'll be like, and I always get the exact same thing every time I ask a guy if he's actually looking for something long term, no matter what he said to me before that. And every time I ask a guy something like that, they're always like, oh yeah, man, yeah, I'd love something like that. If I could find the right girl, I would totally be into getting married and having kids, and and a lot of times what I'll hear after that is, I just don't think I'll ever find her. And that's, most men want a committed relationship. They want to find a great woman and fall in love and live happily ever after. And one of the big challenges that most men have is that they don't feel like any of the women out there that they've met are women that they could be in long-term relationships with, and if a guy comes to you and you continuously hear guys tell you that, oh, I don't want anything serious, I just want something casual. It's not because that's what he wants. It's because that's what he wants with you. And, and that can be a very painful thing to hear. But it's the truth, and I've seen guys. I have a good friend of mine who is just, he was a massive player. I mean, he was the biggest player I've ever seen in my life. And he was out all the time meeting new girls, just pretty much, just every day almost. And it was ridiculous, the stories that I'd hear from him. He'd call me up, even when he was out of town, and just be like, hey, Matt, this is what I'm doing. I'd be like, geez, dude, what are you? He just told me about his sexual exploits. And he met this girl one day, and he called me up about 2 weeks after that. And he's like, no, it was 3 weeks. He called me up 3 weeks after he met this girl, and he goes, hey, Matt, I'm married. And I'm like, I've known this guy for years, and I had no idea that he'd ever want to get married.
Wow.
And he was just like, yeah, I met this girl, and I knew she was the one, and and I just hammered her until she got married to me. And they've been together, I think it's like 4 or 5 years now. And it's just one of those things where that guys are looking for the one. and in order for him to feel like you're the one, he's got to feel that emotional connection. He's got to see you as someone that he could be with in a long-term committed relationship. And one of the things that you're talking about before was that whole thing where, a lot of us, it's just not, instinctual for us to, know what to do around the opposite sex. And I think that, a lot of that is actually kind of this socially or culturally driven thing that we've learned a bunch of like really bad ways of being, a lot of really unattractive ways of being around other people. And I think at a deep primal level, though, I feel like we, there's something in us that gets it, and maybe we haven't felt that in a long time. Maybe we haven't experienced it, maybe even ever in our lives. I can definitely say that I was there. And it's a lot of this is really about tapping into that really attractive part of ourselves and drawing that out. One of the big mistakes that a lot of women make when they come to me looking for advice is they say, how do I get this guy to, commit to me, call me, love me, the list goes on and on and on. And really that's not the way that you want to come at it, because that coming to a relationship or a potential relationship like that is completely disempowering. If what you want to instead do is come to a space where you are such an amazing woman that he wants to commit to you, not you trying to get him to commit to you, but he wants to try to figure out how he can get you to commit to him. And that's the frame that you want to be coming from, is getting to a space like that. Because when you're coming from this other space, it's almost like a masculine, energy that you're putting off there. Because if you look at masculine and feminine, masculine energy is going after things. It's getting something. It's pursuing something. And that, coming from that space is, for a man, it's really like off-putting, and one of the things we were talking about earlier was the whole thing about being a strong, independent woman and what works in the workplace doesn't work in your relationships. And that's, that's so true. And I can't tell you, how many women come to me and they're like, yeah, I'm learning guy talk, and, I'm getting into sports and I'm trying to, talk resume stuff. And this guy just isn't into my, isn't impressed by my, my cool work history. And so men are just intimidated by me. And I'm like, it's interesting to me because, as a guy and knowing lots of guys, and I've talked to lots of guys, and I've been in, lots of workshops and seminars about how to be an attractive man. And I've talked to guys about, all of this stuff. And most guys that I talk to, they actually think it's really cool when a woman has it together, and they're not attracted to it. Right. And it's one of those things that I learned kind of early on in relationships, is that typically we think that what works with us is what works with other people. Mm-hmm. Right. And so a lot of women kind of come to this with the mistaken mindset that like that because they're attracted to guys who are successful and have it together and have, these different areas together, that's what men are going to be attracted to. And so they come out, with this masculine side, talking about their resume, talking about all their accomplishments. And guys are like, yeah, cool. And at the end of the conversation, the guy goes, yeah, she's pretty hot. And I think that maybe, we could have a casual relationship together. And, I just don't feel anything for her, mm-hmm. and that's what happens a lot, is that guys just don't feel anything when you come from that space and a much more empowering space. And our society, at least a lot of like American society right now, has kind of looked at being feminine and kind of this female feminine energy as like this weakness of some sort. And like, it's this I don't know, there's a lot of like feminine shame going on out there and just all kinds of weird things. And it's really, it's actually really powerful, and especially in relationships with men, it's just incredibly powerful. And being feminine doesn't mean you have to be like some, like bouncy fairy, jumping off of walls and, getting drunk at the bar and like, oh, everybody's got their own kind of expression of feminine and masculine energy. And my suggestion is that you kind of get in touch with what that is for you. And, there's rituals and routines and different things that you can go and learn about in order to tap into that energy of yours. But just finding that and before you go on a date, before you meet up with men, pulling that part of you out and just, it's really interesting as a guy when you walk into a space and you see women, right? Because there's kind of these different feelings that you get as a guy. And so if you walk into a space and a woman is very masculine, right? You might look at her and be like, man, she's hot. Like that's cool. Like, yeah, start going into guy talk. Or, like if you walk into a space and you see this woman who's just, feminine and flowing and just, has that energy, she might not even be as attractive as that other woman is. But there's something about her that, I have a friend of mine who's a men's coach, and he actually, he was a player for a long time, and he was always going after the thinnest, blondest, dumbest girls that he could find, right? And he's in a relationship. They've been together for a few years now, and this girl is nothing like his normal type. Nothing. I mean, she's not, fat, but she's not thin. She's not blonde, and she's not dumb. And so it's one of those things where, I was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And I went and talked to him, and I'm like, hey man, so, what's the deal? Like, why are you with her? And he's like, dude, honestly, I don't have any idea. It's just like whenever I'm around her, I just want to grab her and just, passionately make love to her, and I'm just like, cool, dude, that's awesome. And that's kind of the feeling that a guy has when he connects with a woman who's in touch with her feminine energy. Is he's just like, I don't know what it is about her. She's just so magical and amazing and beautiful, and when you see a woman who's in her masculine or, who isn't in touch with her feminine energy, it's kind of like, oh yeah, she's hot, and that's really what the big difference is, and so if, you want to connect with a man emotionally, my suggestion is that you connect with your emotions, because your emotions are your gateway to the feminine world. And men, you hear about it all the time. Men are logical, men are, rational, blah, blah, blah. Men don't get that world. Most men, there are some feminine men out there, but most men don't understand that world at all, and there's kind of this idea of playing hard to get, which is kind of like this gamey manipulation type thing. But if you want to be hard to get, which can be very attractive in an authentic way, get in touch with your feminine energy, get in touch with your emotions, because it's something that a guy will never get. And he'll always look at you with amazement, like, what is going on here? This is so amazing, and I also want to quickly address the idea of drama, because I know that a lot of women are like, don't men find, emotions dramatic? And that's not a very good woman voice. And so here's the truth, though, is that men don't find emotions dramatic. What they find dramatic is expectations, right? They find judgment dramatic. When you're using your emotion to get something or to make him do something, that's when a guy feels like it's dramatic, because he's like, oh, what does she want now? You know, like she's doing this to get me to do something or act a certain way or, you know, say something to her, you know, whatever. But just emotions in and of themselves, feeling your emotions, expressing those emotions to a man, that can be just amazingly attractive to a guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if I can just piggyback onto what you're saying here, I just love what you've just shared in terms of tapping into your own emotions. And before I talk about that, I just want to say my experience is, and it sounds like yours is similar, Matt, that even the most strong, independent, self-sufficient, successful women, for the most part, with rare exceptions, still want to be with a masculine man. And yet, I know in my generation, and, you know, I was really brought up with this idea, you know, this is like the first time that we women can go out there and do everything and have everything and be everything that men are, and we can make as much or more, and we can compete with them on different levels. And as I look back in my own life, I know in particular with one relationship, I so wanted to impress this man that I would talk a lot about my achievements and my success and the money I was making and that sort of thing. And he was really impressed, but he didn't fall in love with me, right? And that's really what I wanted. And so I, like you, I work with a lot of women who can get a little stuck in this area and maybe be a little bit out of touch of what it actually means and feels like to be grounded in what I like to call feminine grace. That's kind of my term. And I like to help women on their path to invite, inspire, and ignite love and passion from their Mr. Right. That's kind of my whole theme. But a big part of that is this piece we're talking about. So being in touch, I just want to swing back to being in touch with your emotions. To me, that's a really big part of our vulnerability. And to illustrate this point, my husband had dated this woman. Some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but he had dated this very, very successful, accomplished woman a number of months before he and I met. And I kind of knew about her through other friends. I didn't really know her that well, but she was the kind of woman that would send out her holiday newsletter, and it would say, you know, in January I ran a marathon, in February I opened a school for the blind, in March I, you know, opened a music school. I mean, she was like this super overachiever, which was awesome. She was amazing. She is amazing. But as things started evolving and working, the relationship started working really well with my husband. At one point I said, you know, what was that? Why didn't you marry her? Because she's amazing. Right? And my husband said, well, I just couldn't really see where I could really make a difference or where I could really fit in her life. He said, she is so amazing and I'm so impressed with her. But he said, I didn't really feel where I could make a difference or I could belong. And I think on a very real level, it's probably likely that she would have wanted and longed for intimacy, but she wasn't able to show her vulnerability, which is a big part of showing that emotion. And I think sometimes when we think about when we think about this concept of showing vulnerability or emotion, it comes back to what you said. You know, there's this perception like, well, I don't want to be weak or look like I'm needy or look like I'm some pathetic little thing. Well, that's not what it's about. It's about being able to show the realness of who you are, your authenticity, and share some of your hopes and dreams and some of the things that really light you up and things that you're passionate about, as well as maybe some of your fears or vulnerabilities, and allow what I like to call sacred space for a man to see that side of you and for you to be able to create enough space for him to see how he might fit into that, to see how he might step into some of those spaces. And you're right, I think so many men, my husband is an attorney and a CPA, so he's totally a left-brain guy. And I think it's true. I think for so many men, they're so in their heads and so in their minds and so in the logic that if a woman can help them tap into some of their feelings that don't normally happen for them on a day-to-day basis, that can be incredibly attractive and can create a different kind of bond than just the wow, am I not so impressive kind of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, what you said right there with kind of helping a guy tap into, that emotion. When you're in your emotions, right, and you're expressing your emotions, and you're talking about them, guys just, you'll help lead a guy into that. He'll like drop down into it, like, oh, like he'll start feeling his emotions just because you are, and if you stay in your head and you're coming from your head when you're talking, then that's where he's going to be as well. And he's not going to feel it from that space. And, and I think what you said about the whole, fitting in thing, I think that's exactly what we're talking about here is he has to be able to see you as someone that he, feels like he could, travel his life, together with you. And if he has this desire to be a masculine person, and he, wants to pursue things from a masculine space, and you come into his space and you're masculine as well, he's going to look at you and he's going to be like, she's really cool and she's really awesome, but, I just don't see how any of this could ever work. There's no place for me. She's not allowing me to be a man, around her. She's always taking the lead. She's always, be pursuing me. She's, setting everything up and doing everything. And, where do I even fit in? What do I do? Like, how can I be a man? How can I feel good about myself, as a man, and feel like she respects me and I can respect myself in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And sometimes I think for women, because we are out there making it happen and in this more masculine mode that works really well in other aspects of our lives, we have to kind of create a pause and allow for this sacred space in order for a man to have a chance to kind of figure out how he might fit in or how he might be able to make a difference, or even present the gifts that he has to offer, whatever those are, in the context of a relationship. And it can take away his motivation when a woman steps in and kind of takes charge or takes over. And I think we also create a lot of lazy daters, a lot of lazy dating men, because there's so many women that do approach things in that way. And then that frustrates other women when men kind of used to that mode of dating. So we create lazy daters. One other little nuance of this that I think is worth mentioning, Matt, and I just love this conversation because it's so near and dear to my heart, both personally and in the work that I do as well, as this is really resonating, is that women, I think, typically understand the concept of safety mainly in the context of they want to feel safe physically, they want to feel safe emotionally around a man. They want to feel like they can trust and be comfortable that their, overall well-being is going to be looked after. And I've had some conversations about this with my husband on occasion, and he said, what a lot of women don't understand is that men need to have safety too. It's just more of an emotional safety. Is typically not as much of a physical safety issue, but they still need to feel emotionally safe. And I think that's why being able to show the emotional side or the more feminine, softer side, or some of our more vulnerable side, our authenticity is so appealing, because as I think we show that, then I believe that makes it safer for a man to feel like it would be safe for him to actually feel some things and express them in the context of that relationship. It creates more of an environment for emotional safety, I guess is what I'm saying there. So that's just kind of a nuance to this.
Yeah, no, I totally 100% agree. And it's one of those things where it seems like when you first hear it, it seems kind of weird, like a guy needs to feel safe around you, but it's really, really true. And it's actually incredibly important. too. And if I were you, if I was someone watching this right now, I would write this down, because this is like major key stuff to getting a guy emotionally connected with you. And you know, there's kind of this misconception out there, because there's a lot of guys, and if you see guys kind of interact with each other, they're like, you know, being sarcastic and making fun of each other all the time. And so sometimes women see that and they think, oh, well, that's what I should be doing. Or maybe they grew up in an environment where they're, you know, really sarcastic and they're like busting on their, you know, brother or whatever. And, you know, for a guy, if you want him to open up and really connect with you and share himself and be vulnerable and, you know, do all those things, you have to be someone, you know, you can still banter with them, you can still tease them, you can still do all those things, but there's a time and a place where things can get serious, and where he needs to feel like he can open up to you and you're not going to use that against him at some time in the future. Right? If he opens up to you and he says something deep to you and you make fun of him about it, he's not going to open up to you about anything ever again. You know, and the more that you can kind of open a space for him to a safe space for him to open up about who he is and about his past and, you know, whatever has happened to him in his life, you know, open up a space for him to, you know, talk freely about, you know, his relationships, or, you know, whatever his, you know, relationship to his parents, or, you know, whatever it is that he's kind of being vulnerable about. If you can open up a space and allow him to do that, he's going to feel comfortable, you know, opening up more to you. And if you do it, you know, in the right way at the right time, when he's talking about these things, he'll feel like you accept him. You know, there's a bunch of things that men and women are different about, right? You know, this masculine, feminine thing, right? Ways that we approach conflict. There's a bunch of things that men and women are different, but there's kind of fundamental things that both men and women are completely similar with, right? And one of them is this whole concept of acceptance, right? We all want to be accepted and loved for who we are. You know, and we feel like we're in this world where we're constantly being judged for who we are, and that we can't open ourselves up to our friends, to our family. You know, I've held workshops where people have talked about things in their life, talked about their feelings. You know, guys have, and they've come to me and they've been like, man, you know, I've had guys come to me crying before, because they're like, I've never been able to talk about any of this stuff anywhere before in my life. You know, I can't talk to my friends about it. I can't talk to my family about it. You know, I can't open up to people in my life. And this is the first time. And I'm just so grateful that, you know, you've created this space for me to open up and talk. You know, and if you can create a space like that for a guy, you know, and it doesn't, you don't have to facilitate it or anything, you know, you don't have to create a workshop for him. But, you know, if you can just be open and non-judgmental and just allow him to be who he is and accept him and show him that you accept him for who he is, you know, that is, I mean, it's just power. It's just, you'll become so, men will be able to connect with you in a way that, you know, you may never have experienced before in your life.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think that comes back to some of the examples you were talking about earlier, Matt, where you talked about a couple of men who ultimately ended up with women that were not their type, at least from what you were describing. But I think the woman that has the capacity to help a man feel that safety and that acceptance can really stand out from other women. So I hear men say a lot, you know, I feel so good around her. I just like how I feel around her. And so, sure, the physical, you know, the intimacy, those kinds of things are important to men, no doubt. I think we've established that. But I think that it, you know, looking underneath the surface here at some of these deeper things is really important. And then another thing I just wanted to say that occurs to me quite frequently, I sometimes think of women as being kind of the still magnolias. You know, we're beautiful, soft, and on the outside might seem more delicate, but inside a lot of women are really, really strong. We have a lot of inner resilience. I'm not saying men don't, but sometimes I feel like men on the outside have that strength and what seems like that resilience and what almost seems impenetrable. That word didn't come out, but you know what I meant.
Yeah.
This tough shell exterior. And yet on the inside, there's a lot of vulnerability, and they can be deeply wounded. And in my own experience with men, you were talking about how a man won't open up if he feels like he's been burned after he's opened up before. My own experiences is sometimes it really can be a one strike and you're out situation in this, when it comes to, this sensitivity with men, because they are not going to open themselves up again to be hurt like that again, or to be embarrassed or shamed or put down. There were a couple of times during my many years of dating that I made some of those kind of errors in some of my relationships with men, not on purpose, but in a couple of those cases, it was a one strike and I was out. I did not have another chance with that particular man because I hurt him in that way. And I didn't understand how vulnerable he was in something that he had shared.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's kind of funny because a lot of women look at men and they think of them as like these confidence robots, men just, they go after what they want and they're always confident and, nothing can hurt them. And I have a friend, Shanti Feldon, who once said, a lot of times women are like, yeah, maybe I need to take them down a notch, and really a lot of that's an act. A lot of that is just social conditioning. As men, as boys, we are taught that we have to be strong. We're taught that we have to have this really strong exterior. And there's very few places that it's acceptable for us to open up about our emotions. It's becoming more and more acceptable. And there's, a lot of different kind of workshops and retreats and stuff out there that have been developed for men to kind of open up about those things so that they can let go of stuff and become stronger men. But for the most part, most men that you're going to meet may have never ever had really a lot of good spaces where they've been able to be vulnerable and open up about what's going on in their lives, and they've always had to be strong, and so if you can kind of pull him out of that space and allow him to get in a space of vulnerability, you can literally be more connected to him than anyone else in his entire life. You can have a stronger emotional bond, connection, acceptance, love, whatever you want to call it. You can have a stronger emotional connection to a guy than anyone else in his life, including his family and his mother and anybody else, if you allow him to open up, and create a safe space for him to share who he is and what his life is about and what he wants and what he's afraid of and what he cares about and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has just really been a fascinating conversation, and I feel like you and I could talk about this for a lot longer because I know we're both really passionate about it. But I want to give you an opportunity to just share with us kind of a little parting thought or word of wisdom or advice. But before we do that, I just really want to thank you for your generous sharing and your wisdom, and the things that you've offered today I know are going to be incredibly valuable to so many women. And I really resonated with you and what you shared because we're right in alignment in what we do in terms of this piece in our work. So I really appreciate what you had to share. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate what you're doing with creating this and inviting me to be here, because I think it's some of it's my life's work. And so, I think it's incredibly important. And I think that, there's nothing more important than creating powerful relationships in our lives. And so, yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, you're welcome. So do you want to leave us with the last thought or last piece of wisdom to wrap up? I do. And what I'd like to say is that, if you're really serious about
meeting Mr. Right and getting into a committed, lasting relationship, my suggestion is that you make this a study of yours. You make all of this, what we're doing, relationships, dating, learning about attraction, and how it works with men. Make that a study of yours and learn about it and really get deep into it and try things out and find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And find mentors, find people that have done it successfully and ask them questions and, just go at this, totally. That's the women that I meet. I've helped women get married. I've helped a lot of women get married, and get into great relationships that led to marriage. And, one of the things that I've noticed is the difference between women who are successful and the women who aren't, is that the women who are successful, they go through the things that I tell them, they take my materials, they listen to what I say to them, and they go out and try it. And then they come back and they say, hey, Matt, this is what I did. Here's what happened. What should I do next? What does it mean? And what should I do next? And the women that aren't usually very successful are women that just kind of give up. They kind of look at it and they go, I don't think that's really going to work for me. And, I don't think that's true. And, and I'm a different special case and none of this stuff is going to work for me. And, you're just a bunch of,
Right.
But seriously, like if you want this to work for you, you have to dive into it. This stuff isn't made up. It's all backed by research. I've been in the dating space. I've been teaching in the dating space for over 10 years now. And I've seen everything.
Yeah.
And I've seen what works, and I've seen what works temporarily, and I've seen what works long term. And a lot of times the things that work temporarily don't work long term. And sometimes they do. And so you have to figure out, what works and what doesn't. And the only way to do that is to go out and try it, and find people that you resonate with, find people that, it works for you. Maybe that's not me, maybe it's somebody else. But if it is me, take the stuff and run, and find out if it works for you, because it can, and you can have the relationship that you want. You just have to put in the effort.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And I agree. I'm so grateful that I ultimately did that on my own journey, because having the marriage that I've now enjoyed with my husband has been deeply rich and satisfying. But if I hadn't done the exact process that you're talking about, done that work, I would have never found this relationship. And so I'm so grateful that I did. And I also find that my clients that continue on the journey and through the process, they are ultimately successful, because so much of this really can be learned. But it's a journey for many of us. It's a process, and some of it requires some deep inner work. So some awareness that we haven't had, but we can only do better when we have the knowledge to do better. So this has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm really, really appreciative of everything you've contributed, Matt. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Bye-bye for now.